Hi, I'm McKenna and I'm the Summer Reading Club coordinator, and today I'm going to start some programming on monarch butterflies. So I've been raising monarch butterflies for 4 years now under an Ontario issued rearing permit, as well as swallowtails for 1 year. And so all of my information comes from years of research as well as experience raising butterflies, and I have done so for both education purposes as well as to help raise vulnerable caterpillars and eggs. So those that are found in my neighbors' yards that might be picked off of milkweed when the milkweed is considered a weed, or might even be mowed over, or when people spray their lawns. So I bring in caterpillars that are in those situations. I do not bring in caterpillars that have been found in meadows or forests or wherever they can grow naturally. And the caterpillar I have today that I'm going to show you, as well as the 2 eggs, were all found on local properties where the eggs or the caterpillar I have were going to be threatened by human activity.
So what I have here are 2 monarch caterpillar eggs on the bottoms of milkweed leaves. That's typically where the monarch butterfly will lay them. It is not uncommon for the egg to be laid on top of the leaf, but most often it will be on the very bottom. And here you can see their coloring, and if I turn them you can see their shape as well. I also have a larger caterpillar, and he's in his last stage of caterpillar life before he will go into a chrysalis. You can see that it's quite large, and I assume that this guy will form a chrysalis in the next day or so because he's eating quite a lot and he has grown quite a lot.
So as you saw, monarch eggs are actually very tiny. They're only about the size of a poppy seed, and they're an off yellow color. And a great determinant if you have found a monarch egg is that they will actually come to a dome shape. They're not perfectly round. A lot of people think that they have found monarch eggs on the bottom of milkweed leaves, but actually what they have found is the egg of another insect, or they have seen a milkweed leaf that is split, oozed out the sap, and then the sap has hardened and then formed what can replicate an egg but is not an egg. And another great way to tell if you've found a monarch egg is that it will be a single egg on the leaf and maybe even on the entire plant. Monarch butterflies don't lay eggs in clusters and will rarely lay more than 2 to 3 eggs per plant. This is because the monarch caterpillar could eat an entire plant in its lifetime, and it's very common for the caterpillar to stay on one plant during its entire lifetime. That doesn't mean they won't travel to the next plant or plant a few, steps down, but the monarch butterfly knows enough to put an egg or 2 on a plant so that plant can sustain those caterpillars that are on it. So what do you do if you find a monarch caterpillar egg in your yard or in your garden? I would suggest just leaving it be. Let nature take its course. As long as nothing is threatening it, then it will survive and thrive on its own. You can actually watch the entire process carry out on your plant, not by touching it, just let it be. And that will take about 3.5 to 4 weeks to happen completely. So you can watch the plant, check on it every few days, daily, and otherwise I would say just let the process happen on its own. If you find it out in the wild, in nature, in a forest, in a meadow, same thing, let it be. You can come back and check on it, but it will be okay on its own. It doesn't need help because it's going to follow the process naturally. So once the egg hatches, I'm sure you're wondering what happens to it. Well, I'm going to show you once it hatches, but that process happens quite quick. So once that egg opens up, it'll let out a very tiny caterpillar. The caterpillar will eat its way through the egg. That's the very first thing it eats, is its egg. And it will come out about the size of a grain of rice, even smaller in some instances. And so once it's eaten through its egg, which is full of protein and full of nutrients, it will start to munch on the leaf it's on. And eventually, as it grows and it grows, it'll keep eating leaves on the plant it was either laid on, or like I said, it might even move to a different plant. Some caterpillars can even be seen eating the buds or the flowers of milkweed. That's not uncommon at all, and sometimes they'll even eat the pods. It's just more likely they will be on the leaf themselves. So like I said, this process will take about 3.5 to 4 weeks. So the egg process is about 3 to 4 days, and that's temperature dependent. So it might be faster if it's warmer, it might be a little bit slower if it's cooler. With this cooler weather we're having, it might be a little bit slower for the eggs I have. And then once it hatches out of the egg, then the caterpillar period, which follows 5 instars, that's what they're called, instars, that will take about another 2 weeks. Again, this is temperature dependent, but it's fairly consistent that it's a 2-week period. And then the caterpillar will form a chrysalis, and we'll talk about the difference between a chrysalis and a cocoon later on. And that chrysalis period will last another 10 to 14 days. Once again, this is temperature dependent, but most of the caterpillars I have raised have been between late July and late August, and they have taken about 10 days, almost exact. So I also have a book I wanted to read today, and it's called Monarch Butterfly by Gail Gibbons, and it was published by Holiday House. This is our Wonder Book version of this book, but we also have a normal book at the library if you would like to take it out. A monarch butterfly settles on the leaf of a milkweed plant. She gently presses a tiny egg on to one of its leaves. The egg is the beginning of another monarch butterfly. It's summertime in the north. A breeze stirs the stem of the milkweed plant. The monarch egg is white and shiny. It is the size of a small dot and sticks to the leaf. You see the little egg? When the butterfly lays the egg, she makes it sticky. Wind and rain cannot make the egg come loose. In a few days, the egg hatches. Out crawls a small caterpillar, also called a larva. First, the caterpillar eats the eggshell and then chews away at the milkweed leaf. The egg of a monarch is almost always laid on a milkweed plant. The plant will be its food. See, he's munching on the milkweed. The caterpillar eats and grows and begins to change. It breaks out of its old skin, showing a new skin underneath. This is called molting. For 2 weeks, the caterpillar eats and eats. It molts about 5 times. Finally, it is full grown and it is a full-grown monarch caterpillar about 2 inches long, just like the full-grown caterpillar I showed you guys earlier. Now something wonderful begins to happen. The caterpillar creeps to the stem of a leaf. It attaches itself to the stem and drops down head first. The caterpillar's bright colors become greenish. Then the skin splits and moves up to the top. The skin falls off. A new strange form appears. It is called the chrysalis or pupa. The chrysalis is like a blanket that is wrapped around the body, growing inside. At first, the chrysalis is long and soft. Then it shrinks and hardens and becomes light green, decorated with gold dots. Inside, the monarch butterfly begins to grow. About 2 weeks later, the chrysalis changes again. It turns gray-green before becoming transparent. Inside are white dots and orange and black lines. So what you're seeing is the monarch butterfly's wings. The chrysalis wiggles, then it splits open. The butterfly begins to pull itself out. The head and legs appear first, and then the rest of it slides out. The wings are tiny and stuck together, and the butterfly's abdomen is big. The abdomen becomes smaller when its fluid is pumped into the wings. The wings become bigger. A caterpillar has turned into a butterfly. This is called metamorphosis. The butterfly sits quietly for a few hours, waiting for its wings to dry and harden. At last, they begin to move slowly and then beat faster and faster. The butterfly flutters up towards the sky. Monarchs have a bad taste and will make a bird or animal sick if they eat them. So most of them are left alone. So this is the parts of a monarch butterfly. And we'll talk about that more once our eggs hatch into butterflies. The monarch butterfly only flies during the day. When it rains, the butterfly stays dry, hidden under leaves. Fall is on the way. Soon it will become cold. If the monarch butterfly doesn't fly south, it will die. Once again, it darts up into the sky. The butterfly will take a long trip to a warmer place. This is called migration. The monarch will fly to where its ancestors have always gone, sometimes to the very same tree. Other monarchs keep appearing, making a cloud of orange in the sky. At night, they rest in the trees. Sometimes they fly up to 12 miles an hour and almost 100 miles in a day. There could be over 1,000 butterflies traveling together. That sort of sounds like a flock of geese, doesn't it? They fly to places such as Florida, Southern California, and Mexico. Some butterflies migrate 4,000 miles. They will stay south throughout the winter. So there's their pattern of migration. Some towns and cities are proud to have the butterflies visit them. They have festivals to celebrate their arrival. Children dress up for parades in butterfly costumes. Sometimes there's a band and visitors come from all around. Monarchs can cluster together, thousands of them clinging to one tree, a butterfly tree. In the spring, these butterflies will migrate north again to the fields of milkweed plants. So I hope you enjoyed that book. I really enjoyed it. I think it's a fantastic book and it really outlines the process or the life cycle of the monarch very well. And we'll actually follow through that process together in the next few weeks as these eggs hatch. Something I want to talk about each week is the threats towards monarch butterflies and what we can do to help them. So many of you may know that monarch butterflies are considered a species of concern. This does not mean that they're endangered. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily even close to being endangered. It just means that they are a species that our government is watching to ensure that their population isn't threatened any more than they already are. So this does not mean that you need to run out and begin saving every single monarch. It just means that there are actions we need to take to ensure that the population can be on the rise or stay the same, but we just don't want them to decline. So two of the biggest threats I want to talk about today are actually related to milkweed because that's where the life cycle begins, is on a milkweed plant. So one of the biggest threats is heavy use of pesticides and chemicals on crops, fields, forests, and meadows. And this is not only a threat because these chemicals can produce poison on the plants that butterflies are eating the nectar from, but this can also be poisoning the milkweed plant that eggs are laid on and that the caterpillar will eventually try to eat. So if an egg is laid on a plant that has been sprayed with some sort of chemical, the egg could fail, it may never hatch, or if it does happen to hatch, that caterpillar ends up eating a poisonous or poisoned plant. So the other threat specifically to milkweed is the removal or contamination of the host plant, which is milkweed. And contamination, I already stated, would be something like spraying the milkweed plant with chemicals, but it could also be the emissions from cars when milkweed plants are on the side of roads. And the removal would be removing the milkweed plant from your gardens because it's considered a weed, or when municipalities go and they clear out ditches and they remove milkweed plants with the rest of the weeds that are in those plants. So I'm sure you're wondering, what can I do to help? Well, as we already stated, the best thing to start with is leaving eggs alone that will be able to survive on their own. But another big thing you can do, and could actually help encourage butterflies to lay eggs in your own gardens or in your backyard, is to plant milkweed. And you might decide to do this in your garden or into a pot. And I know what you might be thinking, aren't milkweed an invasive species? They are, but they're considered a tier 3, which means that their threat is very low. So the best thing you can do is actually plant a species of milkweed called butterfly weed, which is the least invasive and the least spreadable. It will spread the slowest and it's nowhere near as aggressive. The most aggressive species of milkweed are showy milkweed, swamp milkweed, and common milkweed. So those may be the species that you avoid planting, and you might just come across on your walks and look at and decide to monitor the plant for life of the monarch butterfly, and you might watch it over time. The other thing you can do is, of course, encourage neighbors, family members, friends, or even your municipality or town to leave milkweed plants to grow in parks and other places where they don't really pose much of a problem. And the next thing you can do is you might decide to make milkweed seed bombs. These are really cool to make. It's basically a ball of dirt, and you put in milkweed seeds and you let it harden. And then in the early winter, after a few snowfalls, you can go and you can spread them in your yard or along a forest line. And then it will, over the winter go through a process called cold stratification, which is necessary for some plant species, including milkweed. And then come the spring, it will germinate and begin to grow. And then you would have just planted some milkweed. Just make sure that if you do choose to do this, you're not spreading milkweed on private property or anywhere where it has been stated that that invasive species is not welcome. And you can do this simply in a pot as well. So you could technically start a milkweed pot in the winter, and then you'll have milkweed by the spring. I just wanted to thank you all for tuning in today with me for our first program on monarch butterflies. And over the next few weeks, you can follow along with me while we watch these eggs go to caterpillars, into a chrysalis, and then eventually into butterflies. And I just want to remind you that the best way to view wildlife is with our eyes, not with our hands, and from a distance. And that if you do happen to come across any monarch eggs or caterpillars, it's best to leave them alone so that they can thrive naturally and they can go through the process naturally. You might find them in your backyard, and that's fantastic, and let's leave them there and allow them to go through that process, and you can view it and watch it happen in real time. So I hope to see you all in a few days once these eggs hatch, and until then, stay safe and well. Bye.